Let me tell you something. Just because I ain't with my baby daddy doesn't mean you get to talk about my baby daddy.
Stefon Diggs lost more than just the Super Bowl. So he allegedly lost his woman, Cardi B.
Y'all, this isn't just another breakup story. This is the kind of collapse that doesn't happen in public. It explodes behind closed doors and leaks out in pieces until the entire truth becomes impossible to hide. Because what really went down during that Super Bowl weekend, it didn't just end a relationship, it exposed a pattern. A pattern of silence, a pattern of secrets, a pattern that, according to insiders, had been building long before anyone ever noticed. On the surface, it looked perfect. Lights flashing, cameras rolling, Cardi B standing beside Stefon Diggs like everything was under control. But behind that image, something was already breaking. Because in that same city, in that same hotel at that exact same time, there were other women. Other timelines, other stories that weren't supposed to collide. And the moment they did, everything shifted. What started as quiet tension turned into something darker, something messier, something that insiders are now calling a controlled narrative gone wrong. Then came the leaks, the baby rumors, the hidden messages, the unexplained overlaps. And suddenly, this wasn't love anymore. This was exposure. Because when multiple realities start existing at the same time, someone always finds out. And when they do, they don't stay silent. They react. They break. They crash out. And if even half of what's being whispered is true, then what Cardi discovered that weekend didn't just hurt her. It changed everything. Y'all, after that Super Bowl weekend, nothing about this story stayed the same. What looked like a glamorous public moment quickly turned into something far more unsettling behind the scenes. Because while the cameras captured a calm, controlled image of Cardi B and Stefon Diggs standing side by side, insiders say the reality was already slipping. There was distance. Not obvious at first. Not loud, but present. The kind of distance that shows up in small details, delayed responses, shorter conversations, energy that doesn't match what's being shown to the world. And in high-profile relationships, those details don't stay hidden for long. Because timing matters. And the timing here didn't make sense. According to multiple whispers circulating online, that same weekend wasn't just about the game. It was about who else was there. Same hotel, same events, same private spaces where access is limited and where overlap isn't accidental. Different women, different connections, all intersecting at once. At first, nothing was confirmed. No scenes. No public confrontation. Just a growing tension that people close to the situation began to notice. A shift in tone. A change in presence. Something that felt off, even if no one could fully explain it yet. Then came the turning point. Not a dramatic explosion, but a realization. Sources suggest that Cardi didn't react immediately. She observed. She paid attention. And what she saw wasn't a single moment that could be explained away. It was a pattern. A pattern of movement that didn't align, a pattern of connections that weren't supposed to overlap, a pattern that raised one question. How long had this been happening? Because when multiple timelines start crossing at the same place at the same time, it stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking intentional. That's when everything began to shift internally. The public still saw appearances, still saw composure, still saw a version of the relationship that looked stable enough. But behind that, insiders describe a different atmosphere entirely, one built on uncertainty, restraint, and unanswered questions. And then the second layer surfaced. Not through an announcement, not through a direct statement.
Just because I ain't with my baby daddy doesn't mean you get to talk about my baby daddy.
Through fragments, mentions of a pregnancy, images that appeared without warning, discussions that hinted at something deeper than casual speculation. The timeline tightened, because if those claims held even partial truth, it meant this situation wasn't recent. It wasn't sudden. It had history, and history changes everything. Now, the narrative wasn't just about what was happening in the present. It was about what might have been happening all along, quietly out of sight, while a completely different story played out publicly. That's when the internet stepped in. Clips were revisited. Posts were reanalyzed. Moments that once felt normal were suddenly being viewed through a different lens. People weren't just watching anymore. They were connecting. And the more they connected, the more unstable the story became. Because nothing lined up cleanly. the image of control started breaking down. Not all at once, but piece by piece. And right in the middle of that breakdown was silence.
Just because I on my baby daddy doesn't mean you get to talk about my baby daddy. Thank you.
Oof, not Cardi B addressing her breakup from Stefon Diggs during her ongoing tour, y'all.
No direct denial, and full explanation, and attempt to immediately shut down what was spreading. And in situations like this, silence doesn't simplify anything. It expands it. It creates space for interpretation, for theories, for assumptions that move faster than any confirmed detail ever could. That's when perception takes over. And once perception leads the narrative, control becomes difficult to maintain. Meanwhile, attention began shifting outward. It wasn't just about the relationship anymore. It became about who else was involved, who else might be connected. Names that carry their own histories, their own controversies, now being pulled into the same conversation. Separate stories started merging. And when that happens, the impact multiplies. Because now, instead of one situation, there are layers, each one adding pressure, each one complicating the narrative further. And at this point, nothing feels isolated anymore. Everything feels connected, which raises the question that hasn't been answered yet. Was this a moment that got exposed too early, or a reality that stayed hidden for far too long? Because if this is only what's visible now, then whatever comes next might not just clarify the story. It might completely redefine it.
I was saying that, but I'm not gonna do it.
What were you gonna do?
Like, I was just gonna take a little bit of butt out, but I don't have time for that. You know what? I feel really comfortable, like, where I'm at right now, like, with my body and everything.
Yes.
I do have a whole bunch of cellulites because, like, I don't know if it's the age or I don't know if it's the fact that I got, like, 4 kids. I don't know
Girl,
what it is, but it's like, I feel really good.
Your waist is the size of my arm.
Yeah, you're tiny.
I don't even want to hear it.
Yeah, but you know what? It looks so perfect.
It does.
It does, but it's not. But it's okay. I'm loving my imperfections and everything. And
Interview 1109, 1142. Y'all, by the time the second wave hit, this situation was no longer holding together. It wasn't just tension anymore. It was structure collapsing under its own weight. Because once the first layer cracked, the Super Bowl overlap, the shifting energy, the unexplained presence of other women, the next phase didn't wait. It arrived fast, and it arrived louder. The timeline, that's where everything started tightening. Not rumors on their own, not isolated moments, but sequences, movements, patterns that didn't exist in isolation anymore. They connected. And once people began aligning those pieces, a different story emerged. According to ongoing speculation, mentions of a hidden pregnancy weren't just random noise. They came with details, timing, visuals, language that suggested something had been.
Stefon Diggs and Cardi B broke up mid-Super Bowl. For context, no one's having a worse 24 hours than Stefon Diggs is. The Patriots got thought up by the Seahawks, just dominated on the offensive side of the ball. Cardi B, who came to support him, left at halftime and unfollowed him on Instagram after the Super Bowl. Obviously, that's a terrible sign. Some people think it's because Stefon Diggs' baby mama was there with front row tickets at the Super Bowl while Cardi B was there. She found out and she's like, yeah, screw this. And all that enough to be bad on its own, but Stefon Diggs actually got arrested today after the Super Bowl because of the domestic violence incident he had with one of his chefs. So yeah, losing the Super Bowl, getting broken up with, and getting arrested all in 24 hours, that's brutal. It's confirmed that he will be coming back to the Patriots next year, but we'll see if there's any kind of suspension involved with that domestic violence incident. He's known for having drama. Cardi B has been off and on with him, just like she was off and on with Onset for a really long time. But for Cardi B to leave him during the biggest game of his life, yeah, that relationship is over. Another thing, apparently they both spent $1 million for an after party and neither of them went to it because they
Intentionally kept out of sight. The kind of reveal that doesn't appear unless it's meant to disrupt something already in motion. Because think about it. A reveal like that doesn't just introduce new information. IT rewrites what came before it. If there was another timeline running parallel, one that included a child, a separate connection, a different layer of commitment, then everything the public saw had to be reconsidered. And that's exactly what happened. The focus shifted from what just happened to how long has this been happening? That question changed the tone completely. Because duration implies awareness, and awareness implies intention. Now the narrative wasn't just messy. It felt managed. Insiders began suggesting that certain details may have been controlled, not fully hidden, but selectively revealed. Enough to keep things stable on the surface, but not enough to expose the full picture. Until it couldn't be contained anymore. And once that containment broke, everything started surfacing at once. References to late-night communication, movements that didn't match official schedules, locations overlapping without explanation. None of it confirmed, all of it consistent. And consistency is what gives speculation weight.
Diggs lost more than just the Super Bowl. So he allegedly lost his woman, Cardi B. Now, y'all, we had just talked about how happy Cardi was that they were going to the Super Bowl.
This was so packed and jumping, but you know what? Us past fans, we stuck together and we stuck it out and we won. We all we got, we all we need. Like Mr. Dick said, L.
But when the Super Bowl actually came, Cardi didn't have much to say anymore. So a reporter asked her if she had any advice, but she kept it surprisingly short.
Message for Stefon before the game. One inspired message for him.
Good luck.
She said, Cardi said good luck and walked away. Good luck. Is that some kind of sick foreplay that only Cardi and Stefon would understand? I'm like, what happened? What happened to, like Mr. Dick said, we all we got, we all we need. Ow. What, like, where? It's only been 3 business days, y'all. Oh my God. Well, I would be like that too because Stefon's other baby mama was also at the Super Bowl. She was also there. And then fans noticed the ultimate sign of a breakup. They unfollowed each other on Instagram.
Because one coincidence can be ignored, point two can be questioned. But multiple patterns? They demand attention. That's when the emotional center of the story shifted. At first, it looked like distance from Cardi B was passive, a step back, a pause, a moment of silence. But as more layers unfolded, that silence started to feel different. Intentional, controlled, like someone choosing not to react, not out of confusion, but out of awareness. And that distinction matters. Because when someone stops reacting in a situation that usually triggers emotion, it suggests something deeper has already been processed. Which raises another question. What did she already know? Because by the time the internet began catching up, there are indications she may have already connected those dots herself. That's when the narrative around Stefon Diggs began to destabilize. Not through confirmation, but through accumulation. Each new detail didn't stand alone. It stacked. And with every addition, the perception shifted further away from a clean storyline. Now, instead of a single relationship unraveling, the picture started resembling something layered. Multiple interactions, overlapping timelines, and a structure that didn't rely on one connection at a time. It suggested a system. Not random behavior, not isolated incidents, but repetition. And repetition is what transforms suspicion into belief. Meanwhile, another element entered the frame. A single image. No explanation attached. No context provided. Just a moment captured. Stefon Diggs scene with Taylor Frankie Paul, and timing that didn't align with anything people thought they understood. That image didn't need details. It created its own impact. Because visuals move faster than statements. Within minutes, analysis began. Positioning, expression, proximity. And then once again, the timeline. Where did this fit before? During? After? Because depending on that answer, the entire situation changes. If it's after, it's a rebound. If it's during, it's overlap. And overlap is where everything becomes complicated. That's when older content started resurfacing. Clips that didn't seem important before. Interactions that were once ignored. Moments that now looked different when placed into a new sequence. It wasn't just observation anymore. It was reconstruction. And reconstruction has a way of creating clarity, even when the original story didn't provide it. Because people don't wait for explanations. They build them. And as that process continued, the emotional weight of the situation intensified. Not because of confirmed events, but because of perceived meaning. The idea that what was shown publicly didn't match what was happening privately. That contrast is what drives stories like this forward, because it introduces doubt. And once doubt is present, everything gets reevaluated. Every smile becomes questionable. Every appearance becomes strategic. Every silence becomes loaded. Meanwhile, the absence of direct responses only amplified the effect. No clear denial from Diggs, and detailed clarification from anyone involved. Just space. And space, in high-profile situations, doesn't stay empty. It fills with interpretation. Now the narrative exists in layers. A relationship that appeared stable but may have been fragmenting underneath. A possible parallel situation that introduces deeper complications to a public reaction that continues evolving without resolution. And at the center of all of it, a question that hasn't been answered. Not by statements, not by evidence, but by observation. Was this ever what it looked like? Because if the foundation was different from the beginning, if multiple timelines were already in motion, then the ending wasn't sudden. It was inevitable. And what we're seeing now might not be the collapse itself. It might just be the part that became visible. Y'all, by the time the third wave began, this situation had already crossed a line it couldn't come back from. It wasn't just speculation anymore. It was momentum. Because once a story reaches that level, where timelines don't align, silence replaces clarity, and multiple narratives start overlapping, it stops belonging to the people involved. It becomes something else. Something public, something uncontrollable. And that's exactly what happened here. At this stage, the focus wasn't on what started the collapse. It was on what it revealed. Because when people began stepping back and looking at the entire sequence, the Super Bowl tension, the overlapping presents, the pregnancy whispers, the resurfaced connections, the unexplained photo, a different kind of question started forming. Not what happened, but what was hidden? And that question carries weight. Because hidden things don't stay isolated. They connect. They expand. They expose everything around them. Now, the narrative surrounding Cardi B started shifting in a way no one expected. At first, she was positioned at the center. The one affected, the one reacting, the one being watched.
But slowly that changed.
Her silence, which once looked like distance, now started to look like control. Calculated. Measured. Like someone who understood that reacting too soon would only feed a situation already spiraling beyond control. And that kind of restraint doesn't come from confusion. It comes from clarity. Because when you've already seen enough behind the scenes, you don't rush to explain what the public is just beginning to notice. You wait. And that wait, it changes perception. Now, instead of asking, why isn't she saying anything? People started asking, what does she already know? And once that question entered the conversation, everything else began shifting around it. Because if her silence is intentional, then the story might be bigger than what's visible. Meanwhile, the pressure surrounding Stefon Diggs intensified. Not through confirmation, through accumulation. Each detail, whether it was a timeline inconsistency, a resurfaced clip, or a rumored connection, added to a growing image that became harder to ignore. And the more that image repeated, the more solid it felt. That's how perception builds. Not through one piece of evidence, but through repetition. And repetition was everywhere. Mentions of multiple connections, suggestions of overlapping timelines, patterns that didn't resolve cleanly. Individually, none of it confirmed anything. Together, it created a direction. And once a narrative has direction, it doesn't need proof to move forward. It moves on belief. That's when another shift happened. The focus widened again. Because now, it wasn't just about Diggs. It was about the people connected to the situation. Taylor Frankie Paul remained in the center of one layer, not because of confirmed involvement, but because of what her presence represented. Her past controversies didn't stay separate from the story. They merged into it, added context, amplified doubt. Because when someone with a complicated public history appears in an already unstable narrative, the story doesn't simplify. It multiplies. Now, the conversation wasn't just, was there something between them? It became, was this part of a larger pattern? And that question doesn't stay contained.
It spreads.
Across platforms, across communities, across every space where people are trying to make sense of what they're seeing. Meanwhile, older moments involving young Miami resurfaced again. Not as confirmations, as references. Connections that had once been dismissed, now being reconsidered under a new lens. Because once doubt enters the narrative, it doesn't leave anything untouched. Everything becomes relevant. Everything becomes part of the puzzle. And puzzles invite completion, even when pieces are missing. That's where things become unpredictable. Because now, the story isn't driven by facts alone. It's driven by interpretation. By how people connect what they see with what they believe might be true. And in that space, stories evolve faster than reality can keep up. At this point, the emotional weight of the situation becomes impossible to ignore. Because beneath all the analysis, all the speculation, all the reconstructed timelines, there's still a real connection that existed. A relationship people watched develop in real time. A narrative that felt complete until it wasn't. And that contrast between what was shown and what's now being suggested is what makes this feel heavier than a typical public split. It feels unresolved, incomplete, like something ended before the full truth had a chance to surface. And unresolved stories don't fade. They linger because they leave space. Space for more details, space for new perspectives, space for revelations that can shift everything again. That's where this stands now. Not at an ending, but at an edge. Waiting, not for closure, but for the next piece that changes the entire direction. Because if what we've seen so far is only the visible layer, then whatever comes next might not just add to the story. It might redefine it completely. And just when it feels like the chaos has already reached its peak, that's usually when the real truth starts slipping through the cracks. Because what we've seen so far, that might only be the controlled version. The version that was visible. The version that didn't fully expose what was happening behind the scenes. Right now, nothing is confirmed, but nothing has been shut down either. No clear denial, and full explanation, and one stepping forward to completely silence what's spreading. And in stories like this, silence doesn't protect you, it exposes you. It leaves space for questions to grow louder, for timelines to get dissected, for people to start connecting dots that may have never been meant to connect in the first place. And that's exactly what's happening. Because if this was really simple, it wouldn't feel this heavy. If this was really clean, it wouldn't look this complicated. If this was really over, people wouldn't still be digging this deep. Which means one thing. There's more. More details that haven't surfaced. more moments that haven't been explained, more connections that haven't been exposed yet. And the longer this stays unresolved, the worse it gets. Because the internet doesn't forget, IT doesn't move on, IT waits. And when the next piece drops, whether it's a message, a video, or someone finally breaking their silence, this entire story could flip overnight. So now the question isn't what already happened, it's what hasn't come out yet. Because if one leak was enough to shake everything, the next one might destroy it completely.